The mayor of Louisville, Kentucky, signing Breonna's Law today. Crowds taking to the streets to celebrate last night after the city council voted unanimously to pass the bill. It bans police officers from seeking or executing no-knock warrants. Breonna Taylor was killed during a police raid inside of her home back in March. And NBC News' correspondent Cal Perry has been following that story. He joins us now live from Louisville. Cal, the mayor just signed this bill. Can you walk us through some of last night's vote?
Yes, so it was 26-0, unanimous vote on behalf of the city for Breonna's Law. The law is very simple. It ends no-knock raids. No-knock raids, a slick way of saying the cops come into an apartment without announcing their presence. It was, of course, 3 months ago tomorrow when Breonna was shot in that exchange of gunfire that took place in her apartment. Her boyfriend said he thought the apartment was being broken into. The other bit of the law that's very, very important is it requires all police officers in Louisville to have their body cameras on 5 minutes before any kind of raid and including 5 minutes after. We had a chance to speak to some of the local council members about how important this bill was. Take a listen to the head of the safety committee as she tells us how important it was to her.
When I think about the world that I want my children to live in, I want it to be a safer world. I want it to be a more compassionate world. I want it to be a place where black people are not being killed by law enforcement in their own homes if there's no reason for it.
Gotti, you can see the protests continuing behind me. The family, its lawyers, and protesters saying they're not going to stop until those 3 officers that were involved in that shooting are at the very least fired. They're still on the payroll. The other thing that people here are still talking about is that incident report, the incident report that police filled out after the shooting, which had almost no details, at least one falsified statement on there where they said they did not force entry. They also said that Breonna Taylor did not have any injuries. So that incident report, clearly just a fraudulent document. People here are still very, very upset about it, of course, Gotti.
And it seems simultaneously, Breonna's Law has made it all the way to Washington, D.C. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul introducing his own similar legislation banning no-knock warrants. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so he actually met with the family here in the last 48 hours, and his bill is modeled off of Breonna's Law. Now, it does not include that bit about the body cameras. Obviously, that's a difficult federal conversation, but it's modeled against the law here. Now, Rand Paul was under a lot of criticism recently because he was against an anti-lynching federal bill. He said that he thought the language was too broad. I don't know if that played into his thinking about Breonna's Law, but yes, it mirrors exactly what we saw signed here last night, Gotti.
And Cal, the Louisville community, they're still grappling with another deadly incident involving police. David McCatty was shot and killed outside of his own business earlier this month. The community coming together for a memorial today. How is he being remembered there?
You know, he was well known to the community. We were there the day after he was shot. People were so upset on the street. Everybody knew him. He was the man who sold barbecue, especially late at night on the western side of that city. Police were clearing the area when there was, again, some kind of an incident. And again, we don't know the details because Louisville police in that incident were not wearing their body cameras. To make things more complicated, the shot that killed him, we understand now, was fired by a National Guardsman. So that has triggered a national, obviously, investigation, a federal investigation, which is very little sort of comfort for those who knew David McAtee, 53 years old, as I said, a pillar in the community. His funeral will be tomorrow, visitation today. But this is a community that's really now waiting for 2 investigations to be complete. The first on Breonna Taylor and the second on what happened 2 weeks ago Sunday to David McAtee, Gotti.
Thanks so much, Cal. With growing demand for racial equality across America, some TV shows and movies are taking a closer look at their portrayal of race. NBC News correspondent Blaine Alexander takes a look at how pop culture is changing.
For racial equality grow louder. This morning, a Grammy-winning country trio adding their voices to the mix. Lady Antebellum is adopting a new name, but one their fans have long called them Lady A. Dropping Antebellum, a word describing the pre-Civil War South, a term many say romanticizes the period that includes slavery. In a letter to fans, the group writes, "We are regretful and embarrassed for ignoring associations that weigh down this word," noting they named themselves after the Southern Antebellum-style home where they took their first photos. "Our hearts have been stirred with conviction," the letter continues. "Our eyes opened wide to the injustices Black women and men continue to face every day." Reaction split. "And just like that, I'm no longer a fan," writes one. From another, "This just makes the group even more remarkable."
232 dispatch.
From TV shows to classic movies,
frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Popular culture is facing a major shift as longtime favorites for some are now viewed through a new lens. Disney is facing calls to re-theme its iconic Splash Mountain ride, inspired by the 1946 film Song of the South. Long criticized for its stereotypical portrayal of Black people.
I'll tell you why, Scarlett.
And Gone with the Wind temporarily removed from streaming service HBO Max, set to return at some point with historical context around its romanticized depiction of slavery.
Oh, now, Miss Scarlett.
Also under a new microscope, police portrayals in movies and TV.
Don't be swearing at the cops.
A&E Network's announcing it will stop production on reality show Live PD, one of the most highly watched shows on cable TV, giving an unscripted look into law enforcement life. The network citing the critical time in our nation's history, adding, "Going forward, we will determine if there is a clear pathway to tell the stories of both the community and the police officers whose role it is to serve them." The show joins popular program Cops, also axed after 32 seasons. The sweeping changes leaving some to ask, where do you draw the line?
Protesters in Seattle forcing out police, taking over an entire neighborhood and now declaring it an autonomous zone. The 6-block area is outside an abandoned police precinct. Demonstrators warning police to stay away. President Trump now weighing in. Here's what he had to say in an interview with Fox News.
We're not going to let this happen in Seattle. If we have to go in, we're going to go in. The governor's either going to do it. Let the governor do it. He's got great National Guard troops. He can do it. But one way or the other, it's going to get done. These people are not going to occupy.
An NBC News reporter, Vaughn Hilliard, joins me now from Seattle. Vaughn, can you describe what it's like inside of this autonomous zone?
Yeah, Gotti, I think this is where it depends on the source of media that folks are consuming, what their understanding of what is happening on that 6-block radius is. In the heart of Seattle, this is the Capitol Hill neighborhood. This is a rather vibrant area on any given day. Right now, it feels much more along kind of, you could call it a festival, you could call it a block party. And we're talking about a 6-block area where, you know, thousands of folks, thousands of residents have been walking through this area. You've got the food trucks set up. You've got music, you've got documentary showing. It's definitely not, I think, what you would think of initially when you hear of anarchists taking over 6 blocks. At the same time, it's important to note that what has happened is that the police did vacate the East Precinct of their police department. And so what has essentially happened is that they have left this area, and you could call it a community takeover, but that's essentially what is at hand right now. And the city of Seattle right now is allowing it to exist in its present form.
And President Trump has threatened to take back that area. Seattle mayors responded to that threat. Can you take a listen?
Clearly, unfortunately, our president wants to tell a story about domestic terrorists who have a radical agenda and are promoting a conspiracy and fits his law and order initiatives. It's simply not true. Lawfully gathering and expressing First Amendment rights, demanding we do better as a society, and providing true equity for communities of color is not terrorism. It is patriotism.
So, Vaughn, hearing that, could the president make good on his threat?
Well, you just heard Jenny Durkin, the mayor there, directly say, essentially, U.S. military troops are not welcome. And this takes us to the Insurrection Act again, you know, which the president has threatened to use over the course of the last 2 weeks. In this situation, one of the ways in which the president has the authority to use the Insurrection Act is if local law enforcement is not able to effectively protect its citizens. But what you heard from the mayor and the police chief, this was a city decision to pull back their police force because there was such tension for more than a week with those protesters. Again, it was a decision by the city to calm the streets of Seattle. So when you have the city saying it's not a matter of an inability to protect our citizens, it was a decision in saying the president's not welcome, well, then if you were to go to the courts, I'm not the one to make the ruling or the decision, but many would be able to suggest that the president may not have that standing to order U.S. military into that 6-block area here into Seattle. Gotti?
And Vaughn, Washington is having a statewide day of action today. Black Lives Matter activists in Seattle holding a silent march and strike. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's several thousand folks are expected. This is official Black Lives Matter. Seattle King County is hosting what is essentially a march, a protest going down a May thoroughfare near downtown. This is actually south of where the zone is set up in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. So this is separate from that. So this is an active day here in Seattle. It's going to be a silent, what they're calling a silent protest. They're marching about 1.8 miles in silence and encouraging other folks to stop and to reflect and to take all of this in at this time here in Seattle.
Got it. Thank you so much, Vaughn.
Thanks, Gotti.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.